Welcome back to the channel, everybody. Today I'm going to show you how to change the rear brake caliper on this Range Rover L322 full size. Now you may ask the reason for why I'm changing this caliper. I've noticed in the past few days, after I drive this, I park in the garage, I can smell a little bit of a burning. Something burning. It's almost like a clutch smell. The smoke's coming from the right rear wheel after it gets hot. So what's that telling me is this brake is freezing up. It's not releasing. So it's just superheating the rotor. Now the way I checked it is with this heat gun, putting it on the rotor here. Now this was reading about 200 degrees compared to all the other ones. They were out about 70-80 degrees from a short trip. So again, that's telling me that this brake on the right rear is not releasing. Most likely it's the caliper. Sometimes it can be the brake hose. Now it's recommended that you replace them in pairs. I've done the left rear on this a few months back. I should have done the right rear at the same time because I'm having the same issue with this now. So let's go ahead and replace it. With the wheel and tire removed, we are ready to remove this caliper and replace it. There are a few tools that you will need. I have them laid out here. A pinch tool for the hydraulic line. I got a couple different styles here. Screwdriver will help. You will need a 16mm socket to remove the bracket for the caliper, or 13mm socket for the caliper, and you will need a 15mm socket for the banjo bolt for the hydraulic line. First thing, you want to take your screwdriver or a pry bar or small pry bar. You want to stick it between the rotor and the outer pad, and you want to pull it towards you. What that does is it forces the piston back in a little bit, which loosens the caliper from the pads. So that'll loosen your pads. So you can easily remove that. Take your line lock tool to pinch the brake line right in the center here. Like I said, I have a couple different styles. They all do the same thing. It just pinches the line. So we don't have brake fluid leaking everywhere, since we will be removing this line from the caliper. Loosen up your banjo bolt, which is a 15mm bolt here on your hydraulic line. Now you can always do that after you remove the caliper, but it's just easier because the caliper is actually held in place here. So we'll go ahead and loosen that up and remove the line from the caliper. I was able to remove the banjo bolt, which holds the hydraulic line onto the caliper here. Also, the right side caliper will also have a wear sensor on the pad. That will also have to be removed. They just pull out. It's a clip that holds it onto the pad, and it's also secured here onto your rubber plug, and that just goes right over it. So with that removed, we have the hydraulic line and your wear sensor wire removed. So at this time we can go ahead and start unbolting the caliper. Now we can go ahead and remove the caliper. Now there's a couple different ways you can do that. If you are replacing the bracket with the caliper, you can unbolt the bracket here. 2 16mm bolts. There's one here, there's one here at the bottom. That will remove the complete bracket and the caliper all together as a unit. But for the sake of the video, we will be removing them separately. To remove the caliper first, there's two 13mm bolts here, and there's one here at the bottom in the back here, and one up top here. Now these can be different size. If you have an aftermarket caliper already on it, it could be a 14mm or a 13mm. Now once you have those bolts off, you should be able to pull your complete caliper off of the bracket. So now that we have the caliper off, we can set that aside. We can go ahead and remove our brake pads. My brake pads are actually still in good condition, so I will be reusing those. That's the outer. There's also the inner. So now we have the caliper off and the brake pads off. Now we can go ahead and remove this bracket. There's two 16mm bolts in the back of it, one here, one at the bottom here. I've already got them loose, so we'll go ahead and remove those. 16mm bolts removed from the back of the bracket. The whole bracket will come off. It will separate just like that. We will be installing a new bracket with the new caliper. Now, your new caliper most likely will not come with new bolts for the bracket, so we will be reusing these bolts. So we can set these aside. So looking at the caliper that we removed, you can see how rusted this piston is on the caliper, and that's what's most likely causing the issue. They tend to rust up, and then they're seizing up in their bore and not releasing the brake. So that's most likely our issue. Sometimes it can be the hose itself. They tend to get rusted on the ends, like here, and on the other end that bolts onto the caliper. So the metal inside of them tends to rust up and swell, and that can cause the same issues. So it's usually a good idea to replace the line at the same time if you can. Good idea at this time to take this rotor off and take a look at the parking brake inside. Make sure that's not seizing up. Mine's moving freely. There's no issues there. I have had this apart not too long ago. But if you need rotors, now's a good time to do it. New brake pads. I will put all these parts in the description for you if you are looking for new rotors. I did put aftermarket rotors on this a while back. These were the drilled and slotted aftermarket rotors. So all of this for me is in good shape, so I will leave that alone. We're ready to go ahead and put our new bracket and caliper on at this time. I have a brand new caliper. Now before you do anything, you want to take this and compare to the one that's on the vehicle. That way you can make sure you got the right side and everything is correct before you remove the other one. Now this is a complete caliper. Comes with the bracket, your caliper, you got your slide pins, has all the hardware, new banjo bolt, and the seal washers, the copper washers. Now again, this is a complete caliper. That's other than the pads. It doesn't include the pads. Sometimes you can get the loaded calipers with the pads also. But that's the way to go. You can get these without the brackets also, just the caliper. But you might as well just replace it all as a unit. That's the way to do it. Now, of course, mine original ones on this truck, I had painted them a while back. They're red. So before replacing it with this one, I'll paint it red just to match all the other ones. Bracket in place here by reusing the old 16mm bolts to hold it. So that's all tightened up, ready to go. The next step would be your new caliper does come with hardware. Most of them do. This is the clip that will go right here. That's what your brake pad's right on. So you want to go ahead and clip that in. So there's one at the top, one at the bottom. So we'll get those in. We can go ahead and put the pads in. You want to lubricate all the contact points using some Siliglide lube for the brakes. So we'll go ahead and set the pads in place. Just like so. You want to make sure they sit flat to the rotor. At this time you can go ahead and also lubricate your slides. And we can go ahead and install those. So there's one here. There's one at the bottom I've already installed. The inner pad's in, the outer pad is in. You also want to lubricate these contact points that contacts the caliper here and on the inside. Now we can go ahead and install our caliper. Our new caliper in place. We can go ahead and mount that on the slides. Remember, these can push in or out. Go ahead and line that up. We will use the new bolts, the slide bolts that came with our new caliper. So again, there's one at the top, one at the bottom. So now that that caliper is in place, we'll go ahead and tighten up these slide bolts. Then we'll install our wear sensor wire and our hydraulic hose onto the caliper. We can go ahead and attach our hydraulic line. Now the new caliper did come with a new banjo bolt and the copper seals. So one goes on each end here and this will attach right where we removed the original line from, just like so. Also get our wear sensor installed right in. This just pushes right into the pad, just like so, and you can hear that clipping in. Hydraulic line attached. The banjo bolt is fully tight. Our wear sensor wire pushed back into the pad here. Now at this time we can go ahead and release the line lock. What we have left to do is to bleed this caliper. To bleed the air out of the system, we'll go ahead and remove the cap from our master cylinder. Loosen it up. Make sure we got enough fluid in the master cylinder so we don't run out. We're going to be using the gravity method to bleed the air out of the system. So we got the cap off of the master cylinder. Master cylinder is topped off with fluid. Now if you look here right above where we attach a line, there is a bleeder screw. This one happens to be 11 millimeter. I'll go ahead and loosen that up. And I've attached a little rubber hose in front of the line, or in front of the bleeder screw. That way I don't make a mess. This will drain into the pan. So with the bleeder screw off, we'll wait until it starts to drip fluid out of this line and get all the air bubbles out of the system. This method is slow. If you have somebody that can depress the pedal for you, you can work it that way. But I'm doing it by myself. So after about 5 minutes, you can see there is fluid that's starting to come out of this line. So we'll let that drip for a couple minutes, getting the air out of the lines and the caliper. And we'll keep an eye on our master cylinder, make sure that doesn't run out of fluid. We'll go ahead and tighten up our bleeder screw at this time. Our master cylinder cap back on. Depress the brake pedal a few times and see how it feels. So I went ahead and repeated the same process a couple times to make sure we got all the air out of the system. Now at this time my pedal feels good. You want to make sure there's no leaks anywhere, especially at the banjo bolt on the hydraulic line. Everything seems good. Master cover is back on. My pedal feels good. You want to make sure your pedal is nice and firm. It's not spongy, which indicates air in the system. Like I said, at this time, my pedal feels good. I believe I got all the air out of the system. So we'll get the tire back on and we'll take this vehicle for a drive. So I was able to take the vehicle for a drive and no more issues. Our brake seizing problem has been cured. Now originally it did pull to one side because that brake was not releasing. After a short drive I was able to check temperature with my gauge here and they all seem to be equal now. So that was fairly easy to do on this vehicle. Now remember I did paint this caliper on this side. That's the best time to do it, is when the caliper is new. If you are looking to paint your calipers, I did do that on all the calipers on this vehicle. And without removing them, I did them on the vehicle. It's not too hard to do. You can do that. I will leave a link in the description for you for all the parts that I used and a link to a video on how to paint calipers on the vehicle. I thank you for watching.